Hello, my name is Mike Ward and I'm the Global Director of Content at Informa Pharma Intelligence. We're here in Cologne at the Bio-Europe meeting and I'm joined by Darren Ji, who is a former executive of Roche, but he's now about to be a venture partner of a new life sciences fund. Yeah. You're going to be based in China, but your focus is going to be global investments. However, you've agreed to come and talk to us about what's going on in China. You're involved in a discussion here at the meeting, talking about sort of the changes within the sort of Chinese biopharma industry. At the moment in China, there's a crackdown on clinical data quality by the Chinese FDA. What have you seen develop in this area, and why is this scrutiny sort of deemed necessary now, and how is it going to change the way that companies actually operate in the country?
The change is tremendous. Essentially, the crackdown, I think, started last summer. It's in China. It's called self-check of your dossier for submitting for NDA for market approval. We've seen tremendous amount of change. Probably number one is 80% of companies have withdrawn their dossier from submission. 80%. Yes, wow. Yes, it's tremendous. Yeah. It serves probably two major purposes. Number one, it really clean up the company who doesn't have a good quality data for approval. Increase the quality, that's for sure. The number two is really offload so much burden for regulatory to review for those data. Because the penalty is pretty big if you're checked out, you don't have quality data. So those companies voluntarily withdraw would not be subject to the penalty. It can only go well. I thought this is a really smart move at government to do this. Some companies that didn't withdraw their dossier were audited, and some of those actually eliminated from further submission for another 3 years. So this is very positive.
So if the Chinese FDA knocks you back, you're actually on the bench for
another 3 years. You cannot submit anymore.
Right. Okay.
For that 3 years. But also clinical center who were doing this without right quality. Actually, it's probably intensity of faking data, whatever. Then you'll be penalized not to do clinical trials.
So are there any winners in this situation?
Of course, the winners are those with the best quality data or high quality data, right, that you essentially don't have data integrity issue. Yeah. We see that in fact probably a lot of companies left are multinational companies, and also the top innovation company in China, they're really going for quality instead of any of the garbage in data. So
right. Okay. Yeah. So I guess it's almost a way of by default fast tracking your approval process.
Absolutely, and also set a stage for future submissions. You watch your data. Yeah.
So also we know that there's been sort of regulatory change recently around sort of the early stage research and development for new drugs. So can you sort of explain what is actually happening there, and again how that's affecting the innovative pharma companies in China?
Yes, the new definition of new drug actually in China now is a lot more aligned with FDA EMA standard. Right. It's new drugs. It has to be global new drug. This is a big transformational change from the previous China's regulatory. When you have any new entities approved in China, that's a new drug, and it actually is a big change in that way to foster innovation, encouraging innovation for true worldwide drug. What it does is it's making generic drugs a lot more difficult in that sense. A lot of challenges for the generics, for whatever in the past. Most of the company in China actually has been starting from generic and running business on generic profit, but it can only get more difficult for them.
Right, and again, sort of multinational companies with innovative medicines, they're going to be one of the winners again.
Will be a lot more winners there, yes. But also domestic innovation companies, they're really shooting for new drugs a typical new drug, we call it worldwide. They'll be the winners.
So it was interesting. You're talking there about sort of like almost like the harmonization, across the globe in terms of like definitions, etc. On the regulatory front. We're also seeing. A few years ago, we saw the concept of reimbursement and pricing and reimbursement becoming a major issue in the West, in Europe and the US, and companies were looking at BRIC nations as a new opportunities.
Right.
But it appears that in fact China it's one of the lessons it's learned very, very quick. So again, we're almost kind of seeing that harmonization of thought around reimbursement. What are companies? What should companies do with this sort of newfound enthusiasm in China for being tougher on reimbursement?
Well, reimbursement piece is still, I think, it's still a changing dynamic. Quite, it's not totally internationally harmonized yet, right? If you look at the U.S., most of reimbursement come from private insurance, right? In China, private insurance still not quite there yet. When we talk about reimbursement, really we're talking about government-backed national reimbursement or provincial, regional reimbursement. It's something has not been totally in place for fair game for all the players to say how I can get to the reimbursement list. For multinational, we've seen a lot of companies are going to provincial reimbursement essentially by uniqueness of drug. Roche, for example, has Herceptin, which is covered by probably 1/3 of the population in China through provincial reimbursement. National reimbursement has not happened for the last 5 years for a new guideline. So there's no new listing for national reimbursement. So this is still something to be watched on. It's going to be rolled out. Expectation is that the national reimbursement listing will come out in a year or two, which will include new drugs. But that also means that there'll be a pricing constraint, pricing pressure for anything to be listed on national level. So yeah, that's still, on the payer side, it's still an issue right now.
And how easy is it for industry to lobby the Chinese government to ensure that any changes aren't too onerous on the industry?
The industry has been lobbying, especially around reimbursement for innovative drugs, right? The previous setup was primarily more like for generic on the cost side. How influential of industry lobbying it has not been very strong. The government knew the issue, they want to do it. How they change the policy, because you change one place, you have to change the whole system. It's still in discussion. We have not seen much of but we've seen a lot of voices. If you don't do reimbursement for innovative drugs, you never encourage innovation. But if pricing is the only thing in reimbursement priority, then it really doesn't help with the industry.
And sort of looking beyond China, so looking sort of the rest of the Asia Pacific area. I mean, we talked about how there is already some sort of harmonization of regulations. We're also sort of seeing sort of a trend elsewhere in Asia. How do you see that, panning out? And will China be taking the lead on that?
On reimbursement or on regulatory?
On the whole regulation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a new release of regulatory guidelines, or at least a discussion on how the new drug is going to be regulated, how it's going to be really harmonized towards what FDA has been doing. CFDA did one major thing just recent few months. They hired a chief scientific officer from FDA who worked in FDA for 16 years. Essentially, the procedure they're releasing from all we see so far is going to be really close to what FDA has been doing in the US. Is it going to be totally rolled out as it is FDA-like? There are probably some challenges, but at least the system is going there.
Right. Okay, so it's sort of pretty interesting times.
It's very interesting times, a lot of anxiety, but also excitement around this new guideline, this new discussions, and how it's going to be affecting the drug industry. Right. It's very positive, in fact.
Okay, Darren, thanks for stopping by and sharing your thoughts with us.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Great. Thanks.